Hey everybody, Ben here from the Bonehead podcast and welcome to Print to Pitch. This is our new show, our new series where we have a look at 3D printing for Blood Bowl. Whether it's a Patreon, whether it's individual players, individual teams, or some stuff you may not have considered being able to use for Blood Bowl. So some cool monsters, some infantry with decent hand swaps, things like that. More Blood Bowl is more better, and with a 3D printer, your access, your availability is growing by the day. Now, talking of the day, the Hungry Piranhas Part 2, the Halfling team from the Punga Patreon, landed today, so it seems like a really good place for us to dive in and have a look at this team and find out just what it takes to get it to the pitch. So the way Punga do their Patreon is they release a half or a third of a team every month. Now, the actual Patreon cost for Punga is only something about like $10 or £10 a month, which isn't that much. It can be frustrating when the whole team isn't released in one go, but hey, when have you actually printed out a team in one go and tried to paint it? Well, I've done that this week. So the first release, which was last month's release from Patreon, had these guys here. So there's two Halfling Blitzers, which are these two in the middle. You've got two Catchers, apparently, which is one, the guy with the parrot, and two, the guy with the crab on the far left, and four linemen to go with it. They've got some reroll markers and tokens as well. So for 1 month, they didn't have the big guys. And normally what happens is you get a release and it's fully supported, which is excellent. We'll talk about the supports though in a minute, where you can print duplicates of stuff. When you 3D print, you can mirror things. So if you get one of each type of player, you can mirror them, and at least you can immediately print out a full team if you want to. We did this with the Carnival of Chaos, so their Nurgle team, the first month had 2 bloaters and 1 pestigore. Actually, you could just mirror them, and you had 4 bloaters and 2 pestigores, which gave you enough to print out the majority of the team in one go. The first month of Halflings had just Halflings, and all that was missing was trees. But it is the third day of the month, so Punga has released part 2 now. And this month they had 2 trees, so in part 2 there was 2 trees. Now, Punga seem to be on a bit of a vibe at the moment, which is for pirates, for seaside stuff. And we've got the Hungry Piranha team here is definitely sitting in the same realm. So the previous players, we had a parrot, we had a crab, there's a lot of seaside things going on there. And your treemen here are actually the remains of boats, essentially. So one big treeman on the left-hand side there has got the anchor. This guy has got the prow of the boat as well. We've got basically what appears to be kind of dock workers. We've got a guy with an accordion. You've got peg legs and hooks, everywhere. Dude at the top's got a rat. This guy's got a rubber dinghy, like a float, like one of the emergency rings you chuck in there. He's got a rubber ring. So 2 parts to this team over 2 months. Now we've got 2 treemen, we've got 2 blitzers, so those will be your hefties or just a general lineman, 2 catchers as well, and a bunch of individual halflings. So you've got enough there for a full halfling team. Some of the Punga Patreons, the supports have been very heavy, the scale has been a bit off. So I figured the best thing to do was to print out some of these guys in different scales so that we can get a good idea of how big you want to print them and just how well they print. So let's have a look at Chittobox. Okay, so I use Chittobox to slice my stuff, and it works great for me. I know that there's a couple of other programs that people can use, but this one always does a super job. So I am going to take all of the individual players from the first wave of release and we'll add them to the plate and we can have a look at the design, and then what we'll do is we'll take a couple of them and we'll have a look at some of the pre-supports. I know there's a ton of you out there that do 3D printing that really love to support your own stuff. In Triplo, our 3D printing correspondent, I am definitely looking at you. I, on the other hand, love it when companies pre-support things for me. It makes my life very, very, very much easier. And that's why we're doing this show, because some of them are good and some of them are not. Spoiler alert, all of these guys supported really well from the pre-supports, so thumbs up for that. There's a couple of caveats, but anyway. So this is the first month's release. Now let's look at this guy first, because it is such a cool sculpt. So we've got the catcher, one of the catchers. This is catcher number 1. He's got a giant parrot on his back. The great thing is there is an alternative sculpt in this pack, in the first month's release, so there's no parrot. And I've printed one out without the parrot because the parrot is a bit egregious, and especially when Griff is concerned, there's no need for birds to be on the pitch unless you are playing with some kind of Zinch demon or an actual bird team. But that could be quite interesting. Lots of leap, I imagine. Anyway, you can see the sculpt quality here of these players is actually very, very good. Now, there's a couple of things that people have noticed where there's a lot of the same attributes have been copied and pasted, the same assets, the same like pads or something like that. But you know what? Everybody does it. When it's sculpting, whether you are hand sculpting and resin copying the pieces and gluing them on and cutting them in, what it does is it brings a team together in its kind of design aesthetic. But if you look at all the individual faces and the sculpting quality here, Punga actually do a very, very good job with their digital designs. And there's a lot here that very much matches with some of the Games Workshop design aesthetic for the older Halflings. So they kind of remind me of the second edition Halflings. We've got the tricorn hats, you've got this little frilly bit around the neck there, which is kind of Bretonian. It's very medieval. And that's the other cool thing here, is if you're a D&D player, this one release has got a bunch of essentially just NPC halflings, right? If you're going to a bar, with the exception of this guy here who's wearing pot for a head and he's got a football, but actually football's pretty reasonable. Any one of these guys would be a great townsfolk. So if you're planning on playing a D&D game or a D&D character and you're looking for someone to represent your guy, there's some cool sculpts here too. So that's month 1. Let's have a look at the pre-supported versions. Okay, so we've got both the Blitzers here, Blitzer 1 and Blitzer 2, and they come pre-supported as well. So you can do your own files with the other STLs, or you can use these pre-supported ones. So one thing to mention when it comes to Punga is they have quite big rafts. So the actual base of them extends quite a bit. Now the first month wasn't too bad, the second month is pretty potent. There's definitely a bit of consideration there. And the other thing when using Punga's pre-supported bits is the feet are very heavily supported. Now most of the time it's not too bad, and the great thing about the Halflings is they're chunky boys. Halflings have big feet, which means they've got cankles, and cankles means that if you use a warm water trick when you're pulling off the supports at the end when you've printed them, you're not going to lose feet. Some of the other Punga stuff where it's been heavily supported, you have to be real careful with your pre-supported stuff, or you will lose feet in the making. Now, if you wanted to, you could add a couple of extra heavies, but actually, this stuff is all medium, and this is why people like to pre-support. So you can see this bit here. There's some pretty chunky supports on a kind of detailed part of the model. Now, pockmarks aren't the biggest thing in the world to me. As far as I'm concerned, the marks you get for taking off supports from a model are probably no different than mold lines from casting, and actually just from taking off the sprue on plastic. When it comes to this, you will end up with more, but they will be slightly less offensive. But you can see we've got some bits there on the rope bit as well. That guy's gone. But yeah, the supports are decent. They do an okay job. There's nothing that I've spotted, and I printed every single one of these guys, that really upsets me. The bits on the hair there might be a bit damaging, but again, it's not something that I'm too worried about. And if it does upset you too much, you can just pre-support them yourself. Okay, so let's have a look at part 2 or month 2 here. So in this one, you get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 linemen and 2 trees with a musician there as well. So the musician is very much the same as a print from the first month, but with an accordion. I'm not too worried about it. It's quite a cool little addition, and to be honest, you don't need to use him as a musician. It's just basically an alternative sculpt from one of the first ones. And that's great. That's more variation. I'd rather they included it than didn't, to be honest, because it's a really cool little thing. This guy is the same as one of the month 1 guys. He just has that accordion in his hands, and I'd rather have it as an option than not have it at all. So let's pop the trees to one side for now, because actually we've seen them, they're cool. Let's get rid of you accordion boys. Let's see at some of the other halfling sculpts we've got for this month. Right, where to start? The faces this month are creepier than the first month. So you get a nice variation of what appears to be pretty standard halflings in month 1 to kind of the darker side of halflings in month 2. Now, when Games Workshop redid Blood Bowl 2016 and they brought in the Halfling teams, they kind of had a bit of a dark fairy tale vibe to them. They were just kind of unpleasant, creepy, with horrible grins, and we've got it here. Now this is a pretty well sculpted one. You've got the guy with the dinghy, you've got a hook hand there, you've got a guy with a peg leg, you've got this guy who is very much up for a brawl, and the cool thing is that basically any of these models can be used as your hefties. You don't have to use the ones with armor from the first ones if you want to use them as standard guys. You've got a cool guy with a rat here, and you've got this weird guy with a cigar. It's really good. It's a great little mix. I'm a big fan of this guy with his little bandana. And that is all it is, and that's the great thing about basically any team where there's a heavy lineman positional, like the Halflings here, is you can just print and use whichever guys you want. What you need to do is make sure that the catchers and the hefties, if you're using them, which not necessarily always the case for a Halfling team, are pretty well represented. And the great thing about printing is if you want the hefties to be a bit more hefty, you can just kind of scale them up. So if you did want this bruiser boy here to be your Halfling hefty, this is 100% scale, we can just take him up to 110, and he's actually very big. So I printed all of mine out at 110% because I wanted them to have a bit more mass. 100% they do match Games Workshop's. We'll have a look at that in a second, but you can just adjust the scale of these guys. So anyone you want to be bigger or smaller, you can just change. But the coolest thing about Halflings is the treemen, and they have not disappointed. I actually really like this aesthetic. You guys will know I am a big fan of big guys in Blood Bowl. It's really fun, it's risky, there's a lot of power there, it's kind of where the excitement is. If you're not saying Bonehead Blitz, you're kind of not playing Blood Bowl right in my eyes, which I know upsets some of you when you watch the Bonehead Championship. But record's not too bad at the moment. Right, so this guy here has got full-on boat tendencies. And it's really interesting because the way they've supported this guy, and we'll look at that in a second, is these tree trunk bits that are sticking out make excellent target points for supports. So when you actually support the boat, any pockmark that you've got makes sense because it kind of fits in with wood, and that is another advantage of 3D printing treemen. But they've gone to all the effort of putting barnacles on there, a starfish on there that, to be fair, I hadn't noticed, even though I've printed out two of this guy, one at 100% and one at 120, again because I want to try out the different scales. You got a cool barrel for arm. I mean, I'm a really big fan of that design, and the other guy is not too bad either. Now, this one is not brilliant, but it's perfectly serviceable as a tree man. I mean, Punga, they do great work when it comes to sculpting. So you've got the barnacles there, you've got the weird mushrooms, you've got the different planks and the detail of it being held together, you've got the hook. I mean, the anchor arm is pretty much the most exciting thing about this piece, and as a tree model it's pretty cool. I mean, there's much worse tree models out there. I do like the boat guy. And the great thing about 3D printing is that you can click the guy, click mirror, and mirror it so that you've got a different guy. You've got a different sculpt. So you can actually have basically two of this tree standing side by side, and they are slightly different. So if you clone it and then replace the mirror, boop, 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 there we go. You've got two of the same tree, kind of, but they do look different. Actually, that just looks like they're doing the dance from Dragon Ball Z, the fusion dance. Alright, we've got some fusing trees. Let's have a look at the pre-supports. Okay, so the first thing you'll notice is that they are kind of being printed flat, which is really unusual. Normally you print your models at what, 30 to 45 degree angle, so that the way the print works, you don't get too much pooling or anything like that. Pooling? Actually, from looking at the cast, those were the times they goes. From looking at the print, there's none of that. I was actually quite impressed. So I went ahead and just printed the pre-supported versions because I was like, right, we need to find out if this works so that I can tell you guys not to use it. Actually, this is good as gold. I was really impressed. You can see some of the giant rafts I was talking about, and it is going to affect the way you can get them onto the plate, but with a bit of fandangling I fit both the trees and a few halflings snuck in there as well, and it worked just fine. Now, the trees do come in separate pieces as well, so what we can do is we can take all the different parts for the tree. Now, why would you want to do that? You might want to do that if you want to pre-support it yourself, if you want to increase the scale, if you've got a smaller build plate. We just saw that both those guys actually quite filled up mine. I'm using a Mars 2 Pro. But you've got all the different pieces there so that you can build him yourself. Have I lost the head? Where's the head? I'm sure there's a head somewhere. Oh, it's actually there. Anyway, so you've got all the different pieces here for... you've got a separate hook as well for your troll Well, it's a tree troll really, isn't it? In fact, it's called a tree troll. Nice. And all of these pieces come supported as well. So you've got the option there of printing it whole, of having it whole and pre-supporting it yourself, pre-supporting all the individual pieces yourself, or having each bit supported already for you. Now that works out for both the trolls. I guess the only other thing I want to show you before I'll show you my print plate for one of them, because it's pretty over the top, I think, because I really chucked the players on there. Look at the raft size. So when I was printing the halflings, fitting a bunch of these guys on was fine, because you can overlap them. It doesn't cause too much of a problem. But if you're trying to be good, you're trying to separate them, or you're just trying to fit as many as you can on, if you only have a bit of space at the edge, you're going to end up overlapping the edge. It's not caused me any problems. I try not to do it, but probably just something to watch out for. But again, we can look at the pre-supports. There is a lot of supporting on some of these. Definitely hot water trick worked to get the bits off, but I had to be very careful with this. So wherever you see a series, like here, or on the feet, well, of bits that are just lined up together, like the top of a fence. I've got a little tiny screwdriver, so before I fully wash them, so I use dirty wash, then hot water to release the supports, then a clean wash, so 2 different alcohol washes, and then water rinse at the end. I'll use the screwdriver and basically just poke in here to make sure there's enough. Then you can do the side to side trick, and actually what happens is most of the supports give away, and I have had absolute no damage from removing the supports with the pre-supported ones, which is pretty impressive, because sometimes when you get pre-supported it goes really heavy. That's one thing about pre-supported things, is they tend to be well supported so that there's no chance of failure, but what your kind of balancing factor is that you end up with less detail because there's more supports, and you've got a bit of pock marking, and actually removing the supports can be quite difficult, and that's the trade-off. I'm here to tell you that these pre-supports are heavy, they don't damage the model, and I was able to take them off without too much effort. Okay, so this was the last plate that I used for them, and you can see the raft area is absolutely massive. This is the downside of using the pre-supports, but for this one I managed to get both the trees and 2 little halflings snuck in there as well. On my other plate, that's the great thing about the first month of release, is you can get, I don't know, 14 halflings on one plate with a Mars 2 Pro. If I was using my Mars 1, my Mars Pro, I'd probably struggle to get much more than 1 tree and a couple of halflings on it, but actually the trees are a decent size. You can scale them up, you can scale them down, and you can print them in pieces as well. So if you wanted to do it differently, you could pre-support it yourself to minimize that rafting, and then you can really cram the stuff in there. I was happy with this because I really just wanted to see what the trees were like. Okay, so we've got a variety of the halflings all printed out, and I think you can see the print quality is not bad at all. So I'm using my Mars 2 Pro with, I think, default settings. I've not changed much, if I've changed anything at all. And this is printed at 110% scale. So I did a test print of these models for 100%, 110%, 120% to get to kind of grips with what I liked, and I went with 110% in the end because it gives a really nice opportunity to see all the details. Now, if I take the 100% dude here and have a look at, compared to a Games Workshop halfling, you'll see that the scale is about right. You have to bear in mind that this is one of the Chaoslings from the 7th Super Series, so it has a kind of smaller head than a standard halfling. But if you look at the mass of the guy, 100% scale straight away from Punga is about where you want to be. That said, I much prefer just to have a little bit more size so that I could kind of just see the detail a little bit better and have them kind of just be more visible. 100% scale is just fine, but I'm not that good of a painter. So actually having them scaled up a bit just, I don't know, help me see the detail and help me get a bit more pop out of them. Now you can see there's a ton of great stuff on this. Generally speaking, they're kind of simple, so you will be able to get away with painting them quite easily. And I've got a couple of the blitzers here that I printed out at 110% scale, and I've actually started painting. And you can see 110% is what I've gone with, and the detail is beautiful. And I've done the classic Ben thing here, lazy painting. 100 just a 100% brown undercoat, and then I just started painting up the detail from that. Now the whole idea here was that I wanted to just paint up a couple, or at least get the base coats on a couple, so we could kind of see how they paint up. And do you know what, I didn't need to go much further. I put the block painting on here. I haven't even started the uniforms, but actually you can already see that they are some of the nicest models to paint I've had on my desk for a little while, and I've been really pleased with these models so far. So for the line halflings, I've done mine 110% scale, and I guess if we compare them to something else, let's take one of the Black Orc goblins. Size wise, their halfling is bigger. Now the goblins are a little bit small for strength 2. They're a bit smaller than the standard goblins. This is the Black Orc goblin team, but the 100% scale is probably about right. So if you want them to match up the Games Workshop ones, 100% is where you want to be. Like I said, I went for 110, but when it comes to halflings, you've got two sizes. You've got tree and little dude. So if the little dude is a little bit bigger than the other little dudes, it's fine, because you're the one using them, you're the one painting with them. So should we talk about the big guys? Let's have a look at the big guys. So I printed out both of the trees, and I printed them out at 100% scale. Now these are mounted on 32mm bases just for the purposes of this review. I will always base my big guys on 40mm rounds. It just works nicely. It gives them a nice bit of presence. Technically they perform better on 32s, and when it comes to big guys, you'll know from if you've seen any kind of our modelling shows or the Bonehead Championship, 40mm bases and big guys, they make for a bit of an impact. So let's start with this guy. The detail is cracking on the front. You can see the sculpt work. You've got the barnacles, you've got the mushrooms. This is printed horizontally essentially, so this is the pre-supported version, so it's printed like this onto the base plate, which means you do get a few pock marks, and as I turn it in the light you can kind of see the support pock marks from up to, you know, from the, I think the anchor is probably the worst, the anchor and the hands. Now the great thing is it's a tree man. It's a tree man with barnacles on. So none of these pock marks are really affecting the detail. The only one I'd be worried about is probably on the back of the hand here. So this is where you get the opportunity or the option to support them yourself. If this is too much pock mark for you, then absolutely support them yourself. Big models aren't that difficult to do, but you will struggle, I think, to get away with much less pock marking. But it's a tree man, so the supports blend in nicely to the pock marks of the wood and the barnacles themselves. And this thing I did think was very clever. Two of the big supports come in, and these aren't supports. This is actually wood as part of its leg, but two big supports go in right there on the plate. So it's a clever way of kind of hiding your support marks. Anyway, this guy comes up nice. It's gonna be an absolute doddle to paint. This whole team will not take long to paint at all. I mean, these two guys, I've just brown undercoated them, started blocking the colours on. I think one wash and they'll absolutely pop beautifully. The tree men are not going to be hard at all. And this guy has to be my favourite model from the entire set. There's a lot of dynamism in there. The face is a classic Ent. This guy actually looks like Treebeard. We've got an excellent nose. And when it comes to painting him, being able to just kind of flex on that eye is going to be able, it's going to add an extra layer. You know, you can take this painting and do a better job. You can chuck brown on it, dry brush it up, Agrax, and you're absolutely done. Or you can pick out some of the details here, some of the marks, some of the barnacles and the starfish, and actually put some detail in the eye. And then you've got the back here, and you've got all these wooden plankings, you've got more barnacles, you've got the ropes, and you can see the pock marks on the back as well. They're not too bad, but it's an old boat, so it's not going to affect it that badly at all. You've got the starfish, there's a ton of little bits of detail, and that's the really cool thing about this entire set, is it can be as simple as you like, but there's plenty of detail and plenty of fun things there to pick out. So if you are a painter, you know, if this is your primary, like your primary enjoyment is actually picking out the details and doing a really good job, or challenging yourself to paint up something different and to put in the extra effort, this team does hit both marks, and I've been very impressed with it. So this is 100% scale, but as you guys know, I like my big guys quite big. So let's do a little bit of a size comparison against Black Orc. Yeah, this guy's massive compared to the Black Orc, does a great job. fits on a 32, which makes it pretty manageable. And when you line it up to a halfling of either scale, so whether it's 110 or 100, I've got 120, but that's too big. 110 or 100% scale, you know, it's good to go. It's good to go. However, it is more gooder to go. There you go, excellent English there. By printing it at 120% scale. I've chucked it on a 40mm round. This is where I want to be for my tree men. So this size-wise goes very nicely with my my upscaled halflings. If we take the 100% scale, again, it's an absolute monster. Comparing it to the Black Orc, you've clearly got that strength 6 size advantage. And when you place it down, and this is the cool thing about this, it's got a ton of presence on the pitch, and that's really what I'm looking for. For what are the most exciting bits of the halfling team are the treemen. You know, if the treemen perform well, you're going to do great. If the treemen don't, then you're in a lot of trouble. So having these guys be a big part of your team. Now, 120% scale gives an extra centimetre basically of build on it, and that's going to be even better to paint. Now, when it comes to big guys, I do have a size comparison. I don't have any standard Games Workshop Blood Bowl big guys kicking around. I couldn't find them, so I've got the troll here, one of the trolls from the 2 World Tiny Titans from the Bonehead Championship. Now this is a Rock Gut Troggoth model from Age of Sigmar. It's a stone troll, one of the new stone troll models. Say new, it's like 5 years old now, I imagine. But if you size it up, it is bang on where you want it to be. This guy's got an edge over this troll, and if you are playing a proper game of Blood Bowl with some proper big guys, they are going to have a bit of a kaiju battle there. And if you chuck in just a regular dude to get a size comparison, you can see the big guys are big. So 120% for my tree is definitely where I want to be. So that wraps up our first print to pitch episode. I'm a big fan of this team. This is the best one that Punga have released so far. When it comes to the pre-supports, the designs, and actually the simplicity of this really wins me over. I know we've had to wait 2 months and the first release was just halflings and no big guys, but actually I was busy over Christmas, so it didn't really bother me. I had to wait 4 weeks to get both sets. £20 to get the STLs for both sets. £20 will get you a team, and I will always recommend going into a store and buying a team rather than doing anything else. Going in and picking up a box set, except when it comes to Dark Elves, is always easier than 3D printing your own. And it helps out your local gaming stores, and I cannot stress that enough. I would much rather buy models than print them. Every single time. It's great fun, and I have been printing like a madman, but it's only because it would take ages to post all the stuff and it would cost more. So actually, if you get an option to buy a team you like or print one, always buy. It's a lot easier for yourself. But the Punga team here, for the halflings, you've got all the positionals. The sculpting is pretty good. There's a couple of bits I'm not personally a massive fan of. The other tree isn't brilliant, but this tree is. And the cool thing is you get the versatility to scale them up or down. So I've scaled mine up a bit to give them a nice bit of chunk so they look good on the pitch. You don't have to do that. You can even scale them down a bit. If you're scaling down, watch your pre-supports. If you're scaling up, pre-supports are fine. 120% for the tree. And this is probably one of my favourite tree man models now. 120% for the tree gives them a good size, and I think the 100% one's fine, but just, you know, bigger is better. More Blood Bowl is more better. And really, when it comes to that, they're printed. You can choose your own bases, you can print your own bases, whatever. It's not going to take a lot to take this team from print to pitch. So anyway, thanks very much for watching. Let me know what you think about this team, about Punga and their Patreon, and please let me know which other teams you want us to do next. We've got a few lined up, but always want to know what you guys want to see from us. But anyway, I'm going to disappear. Thank you very much for watching. Happy printing. Thanks very much for watching. We really appreciate your support. If you want to help support the channel even further, please like and subscribe, or come join us on our Patreon. We have early access to content. We get loads of feedback from you guys, and we try and do competitions as much as we can. Or you can get yourself some Bonehead podcast merch on our Spreadshirt site. So if you want to support a team, especially for the Bonehead Championship, you can pick up a shirt, a mug, things like that. It all helps support the channel, and we really appreciate it. Anyway, links below. Thank you very much. Happy blocking.